Welcome to our panel discussion on ideas for Constitution Day programming. I'm joined today by two panelists who run innovative Constitution Day programs at their respective universities. On the panel today, we have Daniela Mascarenhas, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Xavier University of Louisiana, and Tom Pope, Professor of Political Science at Lee University. I'm William Obrochta, Assistant Professor of Political Science at Texas Lutheran University and the Director of Professional Development for the APSA Civic Engagement section. The goal for today's panel is to focus on specific Constitution Day programs that are occurring on our panelists' campuses, and to think about how those programs came to be, how they're successful, and how we might think of some of those ideas that those panelists have come up with as applicable to our own institutions. And so I think the first thing that I want to start by asking y'all is to think about what we just did. Constitution Day just happened, and a number of different institutions have celebrated different Constitution Day events. So I was hoping that, Tom, maybe you could start off by describing what occurred at Lee University at your most recent Constitution Day.
Sure, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So Lee University for the past 15 years now has been hosting an annual Constitution Day Quiz Bowl. We just sometimes refer to it as Constitution Bowl. And this last year, we hosted 24 teams representing 12 different regional high schools and kind of home schools in the area. We had about 115 high school participants engage in this, and about 70 Lee University undergraduates helped to facilitate it. So uh, this has kind of evolved over the years. We might talk a little bit about how that evolution occurred, but basically it is a kind of round robin style tournament asking questions about the Constitution. The high schoolers will kind of prepare for this now in their civics classes or social studies classes, teams of 5 students, and we'll have our undergraduates kind of run different competition rooms as readers and adjudicators and scorekeepers and that kind of thing. Um, and they compete for eternal glory. There's no cash prize or anything like that. It's just a good time. Um, we also more recently have kind of added in an element where there is at the outset a kind of local civic leader who will give maybe a 20 minutes conversation about civic education or about kind of what responsible citizenship might look like in the community. This year we had Judge Curtis Collier, who is a senior United States District Judge for the Eastern District of Tennessee, came in. And this event tries to both get students thinking about the Constitution, the American founding, our political institutions, but then also about how they might kind of embody those institutions locally through their life within the community.
Daniela, what about your experience?
My Constitution Day that I was very proud of um, was sort of an homage to the Constitutional Convention. At Xavier, we are guided by our mission, which is to create a more humane and just society, and to have our students be leaders in the world. So I wanted to introduce my students to um, the spirit of the Constitutional Convention, which was to come together and write something new, a more what was perceived as a just constitution, in leaving behind the Articles of Confederation. So I did a sort of simulated constitutional convention, where I gathered my students. I had about 80 students that showed out, to sit and debate important aspects of the Constitution. To set them up for this conversation, I did sort of a 3 week long campaign where all of the flyers advertising Constitution Day also had a QR code on them. And if you scanned the QR code, you were taken to like a survey where you could have your unfiltered thoughts about the Constitution and various pressing issues. I asked about issues related to racial justice, especially because I am at a historically Black university. Issues related to various forms of freedom, freedom of speech, right to bear arms, lots of different things, even institutionally. Questions about executive power, questions about checks and balances. And so I did this sort of data gathering for 3 weeks. And then leading up to the actual simulated convention, I made word clouds. I used like a word cloud software to sort of highlight the major concerns or the sort of overlapping concerns that students had on our campus. So at the Constitutional Convention, when we all met, I was able to have these word clouds up on a screen, and I think they helped stimulate the conversation. And it was, like I said, 70 people, about 70 to 80 people in this room, but lots of really respectful conversation. I was very impressed at the sort of spirit that existed in the room. Um, I also had a few special guests that were part of these simulated delegates. I had one of our council members, Leslie Harris, here in New Orleans. Our former mayor, we're about to have mayoral elections, LaToya Cantrell. And then I also had a professor of political science from Alabama University, Alabama A&M, Sharice Janae Nelson. And so all of us sort of sat and were delegates to sort of, parody, or at least what I think pay homage to the Constitutional Convention. I had sort of costumes, tricorn hats, and these, powdered wigs and bibs that everyone could wear, these big ruffled collars. And I think it gave everyone sort of like an icebreaker. Everyone got into the spirit of things, and so it was a really lovely conversation. It was an evening spent in really reflective conversations with one another on campus about what's important in the Constitution, what should we change, if at all, what do we need to retain, what's important to us as a people living under the Constitution.
Thank you both for those descriptions. I mean, the level of, and we'll talk about this more later, right? The level of commitment to that type of event and making sure it was successful with that number in both cases of participants, students, community members, leaders coming out and participating is really inspiring, and that's great to hear that those things have been successful in the cases. Tom, you were mentioning earlier that this has been the Quiz Bowl idea has been going on for 15 years. And so I wondered if both of y'all, but Tom first, can talk about the kind of trajectory of, has this always been going on? How did the initial idea form? You mentioned already, some of the new things that have been included, but when I say here two amazing examples of Constitution Day, and then somebody's like, okay, how do I start building from sending out an email once a year saying it's Constitution Day to something like this? I think learning more about that process could be really important.
Yeah, so I first arrived at Lee in 2010, and my colleague Steve Swindle and I kind of brought the first groups to campus. Early on, it was tough because you don't have the kind of name recognition or momentum of things going, and so it was just a few local high schools. When you plan this type of event, there's not only the who are you going to invite, but you have to think about the tournament structure, and you have to think about the timing of things, and what do you do with like rules ambiguities. And we were just I was literally the first few years making up questions about the Constitution like minutes before the next round would occur, and I promise you that I was making mistakes on these things. But I think that the community had a lot of goodwill, that they recognized it's just, junior faculty member Tom Pope trying his hardest to get some of these things going. And there was a lot of interest in providing an interesting opportunity for high school students to leave their campuses, to compete with one another, to feel appreciated for doing something academic. I feel like a lot of times there are students who are quite bright, but might not have the spotlight in their academic successes. And this is just a chance for students um, to find a bit of praise in this very niche ability of uh, understanding the nuances of our Constitution. Um, I do think if you're going to run something like this, spreadsheets are your friend, and recognize that our Constitution is not, 100 pages long. And so the number of questions you can pull out of a finite document become difficult over time without asking questions like, what's the fifth word of Article 2? And so um, we expanded over time to different categories of questions. We have, the Constitution unamended. Then we have categories of questions on the amendments. We have questions on select Federalist Papers. We have questions on the Declaration, a few questions on the Articles of Confederation and founding history. And then recently, and this is much to the chagrin of the competitors, we include a few questions on the Tennessee State Constitution just because it might be nice if students understood that, there's more to American government than just the national government. And so some basic questions about the structure of the Tennessee state government have been, I think, beneficial in kind of broadening things out. Um, I do think that as we've done this over the years, we've been able to build on our successes, and students at Lee that help us to execute the thing. They now have a tradition of having been competitors when they're in high school, and now they get to be the ones that are asking the questions. And having students to run it, I think, helps a lot with chilling people out a little bit because they recognize that these are closer to being peers. It is a community event. The teachers will cut them a bit of slack. Um, but then also, it's a great way of kind of like it's given us a lot of momentum with Pi Sigma Alpha here at Lee, and it allows Lee to connect with students out. I'm sorry, it allows for the political science program to connect with students outside of the political science major because even if you're an English major, quiz bowls are fun. And we leverage the students not just to run the competition rooms, but just to be mascots for the various teams. So we've got 24 teams wandering around. They don't know Lee University. And so we'll assign a student to just be a cheerleader for that team and to help them study the day thereof and to root for them and then to take them to the dining hall so they can get some lunch. And that's something that anybody can do. And it's a good time as well. So I think that has been something that infrastructure that we built out over time that has been really valuable for us. Just it starts hard and it gets easier. One other
Daniela?
thing, sorry, that
Oh,
I
go ahead.
mentioned, just that so this event, we've been running it as kind of a political science program for a while, but over the years, I direct Lee's Center for Responsible Citizenship that has some external grant funding. And we've been able to leverage some funding from Pi Sigma Alpha and from the Jack Miller Center to help us sponsor these events. And that just pays for food. It helps to provide stipends for some faculty members. It might help to manage the infrastructure of it. And so I do think also if you're running a Constitution Day event, there's a lot of interest in grant funding to do creative events that go beyond just bring in a speaker.
Yeah. Going off of what Tom said as well, my Constitution Day specifically was also sponsored by a grant from the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities. So that definitely helps to seek out grant money to get this off the ground. Um, Unfortunately, I think, Tom, I am that junior faculty that is kind of in the thick of it and getting this started up. So my simulated Constitution Day, the simulation, that was only my second time running a Constitution Day panel. The previous year, I did a very traditional panel. I had great rock star people that came and spoke. I had a professor here, Randy McKee. He's a lawyer here in New Orleans, and has taught our civil rights and civil liberties courses for a long time. And then I also had Andrea Armstrong, who is a professor at Loyola in their law school. And she is just an incredible civil rights lawyer, has researched and published really great work, and is also kind of a figure in the public eye. So I had great people um, for the first Constitution Day that I did, and it was great. There was nothing wrong with it. Um, it just certainly didn't have the attention grabbing element that I thought students would want to get involved with Constitution Day. Of course, you can coax them with food and extra credit. But that only goes so far as to keep their interest for the evening that you're doing this, or, the one day that you're doing this. So I wanted to do something that would stick with students. So that's why I sort of changed my format. And I still got rock star people. I still had these really great representatives. Troy Carter, our congressperson here in Louisiana, in our district, even recorded a video for opening remarks. So I still had these really great figures who were featured prominently in my Constitution Day, the simulated Constitution Day. But students just left that Constitution Day with far more interest in the Constitution, not just someone telling them what they should think about the Constitution, but them actually grappling together these concepts of the Constitution. Students told me that they changed their mind about certain aspects. There was really great conversation that happened. So over time, I've been trying to capture that interactive spirit. Just a few weeks ago, when Constitution Day happened in September 2025, I also had another sort of rock star group of people. I had two former members of Congress that were on campus. I had Congresswoman Abby Finkenauer, who was a Democrat from Iowa, and I had Congressman Bob Goodlatte, who is a Republican from Virginia, both of them former members. But I had them just sort of sit with my students and talk about what their role was in Congress, especially in light of the Constitution. One of the most amazing parts of this conversation was talking about the impeachment process, which is specifically outlined in the Constitution. Bob Goodlatte he headed up the impeachment process of two former federal judges. One of them was the last who was successfully also removed from office. And so my students got to actually have conversation with him about that process. They got to have the real world experience in talking about the Constitution rather than someone just telling them what to think about the Constitution. So I've been moving in that direction of thinking about interactiveness. I think that has more staying power with my students rather than just, here's a panel, someone's talking at you, goodbye.
Well, it seems like both of y'all are thinking about interaction and students getting involved with the actual document and becoming more familiar with articles and knowing things about them or being willing to be in conversation. And I think it's also interesting, though, that y'all have chosen two uh, somewhat different approaches to doing that. One, which is kind of replicating and expanding an event, making it bigger every year. And then Daniela, your approach of trying or using a different strategy in different years. And so I wondered if Daniela, you could say a little bit about your rationale for making that decision to change the event types, and if that's kind of the longer term plan, or if you're kind of trying out different events at this point. And what you're thinking about that is, does the attention grabbing element decline over time in your mind, or how have you thought about that question?
I have done different things over time because I'm sort of, as I said, junior faculty, right? This is my fifth year at Xavier. I'm going up for tenure this semester. So I'm trying to see what resonates with students the most. And I'm also trying to utilize the resources that I have, especially in this sort of startup mode that I'm in, right? So when I have resources on hand, which is connections to these various people that have expressed an interest in wanting to come to Xavier, I've been utilizing them, like what I have on hand. I think once I get a little bit more institutionalized, I can have something that's replicated every year. But I'm also having fun with the experimentation. So, even though it is a lot of work, even though it is grant writing plus planning and all of these things, it is really fun to change these things and sort of surprise students with something every year. So, our campus is not very, even though we're dedicated to social justice, our social science group, we're a small portion of what happens at Xavier. At Xavier, we are a very, very heavy STEM school. We send a lot of students to medical school or graduate school in engineering. Our pharmacy department and graduate program is very renowned. And so I'm trying to do things, as Tom had mentioned before, that gets us outside of just the political science department. And I think having these sort of surprising things, these fun things, piques the interest not just of political science majors or even sociology majors or history or our African American diaspora studies majors, but also those in STEM that want to see what this spectacle of a Constitution Day is. Why are these people walking around with wigs and, hats and big collars? I think that the more surprising I make that, especially in this early phase, the more likely I am to attract from across the campus.
Tom, I wondered if picking up on this, you could talk a little bit about goals for the Quiz Bowl experience, given that it seems like obviously a goal that I don't think needs to be stated more is that we'd like people to become more familiar with the Constitution. Okay, great,
Right.
right? But what Daniela was talking about earlier, okay, expanding across campus, making students that may not initially be interested aware or be willing to at least look at the powdered wigs as they walk by and think about it for 3 seconds. As you mentioned, then like the interaction with the actual high schools. So, what are some of the goals that y'all have been are trying to achieve with your
Yeah.
program?
I think our goals have evolved over time, and that the first few years we did it, it's just, oh, we need to have a Constitution Day event. Let's do a quiz bowl. That could be fun. And we didn't think much bigger than that. But again, as you kind of get your feet under you, you can start thinking a little bit more robustly about this. And I think one of the disadvantages of doing something like a quiz bowl is that students will come in, they'll, have memorized Article 1, Section 8 powers of Congress, but like that doesn't mean that they understand them or that they're good citizens. And so I think that one of the advantages, something that Danielle is doing, is that she asks students to really think about like how do you engage with this democracy? And so I have noticed that that was a weakness of part of what our programming was, and that was some of the impetus behind bringing in a member of the local community to kind of talk about their experience in civic life. I wanted there to be at least a moment in this programming where we could see kind of what the Constitution has been building towards. This person is living out some of these institutions. And it's like a 20-minute talk. It's not the whole thing, but that gives us a moment of framing. I think another goal that has arisen is, as you mentioned, like we have a lot of contact with these high school students, but beyond that, we also have connections with the high school teachers, and that has been a relationship that's grown over the years. Um, and part of our funding of this event from the Jack Miller Center has also led us to host kind of a summer civics institute. And so my colleague Mark Scully and I will host a kind of week-long discussion of primary source readings with these local teachers. And so it's a chance for us to build relationships with just the community. And so now it's not just Lee University doing its thing as the ivory tower. It's like, what does the conversation about citizenship look like in Cleveland, Tennessee? And I care a lot about local communities and, like lawmaking and national government is kind of the least interesting part of citizenship. And so I'm very excited about ways of um, having a kind of holistic education that starts even before I see students and then can be handed off once I get them to carry them forward.
Mhm. And you mentioned in that response, and both of y'all have talked about some of the ways that doing a project or a program for Constitution Day that's that expansive or that has the potential to expand has been supported by other institutions on campus, grant money, this type of thing. So, Pi Sigma Alpha has been mentioned, the Jack Miller Center has been mentioned, state-based programs like Louisiana Endowment for Humanities have been mentioned. I wondered if maybe there's some additional funding sources to say, but also on-campus support. Tom, you already mentioned this the center that you're directing, but who are other collaborators as part of this on campus so that if you're trying to start things up like Daniela was talking about, who's the sympathetic ear? Daniela, in your experience, what have those offices been, or how have you gotten that support?
Yeah, so I did get a grant through the Louisiana Endowment for the Humanities, but I also was in partnership, especially for advertising and rental space and things like security, since I did have members of the public on campus. I had support through our Office of Academic Affairs. And it was a very easy sell to them that I wanted to do this because I just said, hey, Constitution Day is federally mandated. Want me to do something about it? Um, and so it was very easy to get them on board to do something creative, especially as I mentioned before, everything we do here at Xavier is guided by our mission of creating a more humane and just society and raising students for leadership in the world. So I think it's very easy for me to frame Constitution Day in that way, and approach our Office of Academic Affairs and say, hey, I need space for this. I need personnel for this. I need technology for this. And so they were happy to help. The other group, our Pi Sigma Alpha chapter is trying to get its feet off the ground right now. However, I am the faculty advisor for a civic engagement group on campus called the Government and Politics Association Society, and they pride themselves as the civic engagement group on campus. And so, as the faculty advisor for them, I had my sort of labor force already out for me. My students who were doing the advertising, QR codes were really important for my event. So they were the ones that were putting QR codes up in different places, getting people to scan them, getting people to get involved with the survey. And I think a lot of my outreach was helped by my students themselves.
Tom, anything to add on sources of support?
Yeah, I mean, I initially it was just kind of political science out in the state of nature running this thing. There wasn't a lot of institutional support. It's just us trying to keep it together. But I mean, and frankly, there were some barriers initially because we took over the entire humanities building, and that, frustrates colleagues if you're having to move classes and things like that. So I do think negotiating support with other departments that might be affected by this influx of students is something to take care of pretty early on and recognize that people are sacrificing a little bit. And you got to double check to make sure that everyone's being taken care of. But, over time, if you're bringing in, particularly for this type of event, you're bringing in members of the community to campus, you're bringing in high school students to campus. I mean, I hear that college campuses are looking to get more high school students to show up. And so, admissions became interested in this. I try not to use it as a recruiting event, but certainly having kids on your campus is a boon for admissions. And so that has, as we have been successful with this event, and we've been faithful in a few things, we've been given the opportunity to have more flexibility on campus and more reputation. The university president welcomed students to this event this year, and that's something that shows a kind of campus buy-in. And my colleagues, now they're excited when they see hordes of high school students wandering the hallways and disrupting things because it's exciting and fun. So in terms of actual like logistical assistance, admissions and the president's office has been our primary allies in this. Other departments are willing to support us and kind of allow students to miss class to volunteer in this event. But the event is very political science heavy in that it's myself and my colleagues who are handling the heavy lifting of orchestration. Yeah.
It seems like in both cases, and to kind of wrap this discussion up a little bit, that you know what's required is an initial inspiration for wanting to do something a little bit differently, and then trying some things out can work, building in with different partners can work, but thinking strategically about how Constitution Day is helping to facilitate Constitution related goals, but also other goals in the community, on campus, with students, making connections, all of those types of things, as opposed to just seeing, hey, I know Constitution Day is federally mandated. Let's only make it about Constitution Day and not think more broadly. And so that's a preview of what the next panel is going to be about. So I want to thank everybody for participating in this panel. And in the future panel, we're going to discuss how Constitution Day events can be thought of as starting to facilitate that broader conversation and as a launching off point, perhaps, for more civic and community engagement. And so I hope all of the audience will be on the lookout for that second panel. And thank you so much to our participants today.
Thank you.
Thank you.